Well, we'll just go as he goes through and we'll pick up things. Okay.
Hi, I'm Joey Trombley, and welcome to another edition of Hometown Stories here with Calvin Castan on the camera. Again, I'm Joey Trombley, and with us is Superintendent John Fairchild, and we have librarian Steve Patnote. And Calvin thought it'd be a great...
Superintendent of what?
Well, Chazy Central Rural School. Oh, that's true. I'm taking it for granted. All right. Yeah. I'm assuming everybody has watched this before. So Calvin nails me there. Thank you, Calvin. And there's no editing here, so everybody sees this. So, but we had the 100-year celebration in October.
Yes.
And there was a big build-up to that. And people brought in pictures of each decade that were up on the walls of the hallways that just came down recently. And Calvin thought it might be a good idea to do a segment of going through the decades and some of the pictures and maybe expand on that. And obviously we're not going to do this in one segment. We'll probably do a few segments to get through this, because as you know, that we're in school right now. It is actually on a Tuesday, and they have classes, and John has work that he has to get to. So we're going to be probably about a half-hour segment here today. But whose idea was it to do what you did here as far as putting the pictures up in the hallway by decades?
I actually think that was my idea in the conversation that as we were creating the plan for our whole celebration, that we wanted to really document what had happened at Chazy from the very beginning up to the current day, and try to highlight both what happened in the school and then other public events that were going on at the same time. So, you know, as you look through some of these, you'll see some notations about other things that weren't at Chazy, but just part of the world history that was going on.
Okay. And then who took the bull by the horn to say, okay, I'm going to try to find pictures for the 20s and the 30s and all the way up to the present?
That would be our celebration committee, and there were about 8 or 10 individuals on that. Several of them really ran with this. We had Kim Howley, we had Maggie Ryan Trombley, we had Julie Menard, and several others, and I know Mary Lapierre. I'm going to forget some of them. They're going to be irritated. I forgot all the names, but I don't have the list in front of me. They really took it and ran with it, and they divvied up all the different tasks related to the celebration. They found the pictures, they put them up on the wall, and created the timeline that was really one of the highlights of the event. And a lot of people spent time just looking at the wall while they were here. We left it up for 3 months.
Okay. Because I know that there was, I think, concern with the committee that there wasn't enough stuff here for the celebration, but it came out after it was all said and done, people couldn't get through everything. Between what there was to look at, between seeing people they hadn't seen in decades, having conversations going on. And Steve, I know you really grasped this celebration, and you kind of took ownership of it in some aspects.
Well, well, only in my capacity,
Right.
my part of it, yeah. But yes, it did become a very exciting historical. I've called it like a long episode of History Detectives, because it became, at the same time we were going through everything that we knew, we were finding as much stuff that we didn't know while we were going along. So it became a real learning process. We were catching up all of the time with. We just found something we didn't know existed before. What is it? So it was kind of a fact-finding mission at the same time that we were trying to organize it and put it into, like John said, a hallway length timeline.
Mm-hmm.
So it was quite an adventure, really, and it was very interesting. We learned a lot about this school that we didn't know before, things that were taken for granted or assumed to be correct in the past, and there were little adjustments and changes all along the way.
Or stuff that we thought were fact were really fiction, and vice versa.
Exactly, right. Yeah,
Going
they were
through that
more like,
process.
instead of facts, they were someone's fond memory.
Okay.
We all have those that might have altered a little over the years.
Like the story of the teachers walking from Gray Gables through the tunnel that connected
Right,
to the
I've
school.
always heard that, yeah.
Yeah, they never walked through the tunnel. It was designed for water lines and electrical lines to be run through there. I mean, but there's that story out there.
Right. Now I know that they had created a Facebook page, and that was very popular.
Right.
And I think they were requesting information like this through the Facebook page, if I
Yes.
recall.
Yeah, we had lots of people send in images that we added to the documents that we had. I think the page actually got to 1,000 participants in about 2 days.
Wow.
And it's still active. People are still having conversations on there and sharing. And that's been the best part about all of this, is just reconnecting.
So would people actually bring in a picture, or they would just send it to you and you'd print it? Or was it
Both.
a little both?
Right. The committee took everything that they received and scanned and had it printed. They either printed them themselves or brought them to a location in Plattsburgh, I believe. That
Okay.
They were doing nice, clean prints of everything for us.
All right. And when the prints were coming in, were they coming in with stories behind it, or you're just, here's a print?
Both, right? It was a
Yes.
combination. Some folks knew all about what was in the picture, and others said, I just found this, you know, if you can use it, go ahead.
Mhm.
So it was a little combination.
Because I know we did quite a few segments come and build up to the celebration. We had two stories that we did with John West, Dick West, and Bob Cheeseman. And then I think we did two there, and then we had, of course, the day of the celebration. So I guess you can call this like a post-celebration, if you will. But that's right. We had the teachers come in too. So actually, this is 2, 3, 4. This will be our 5th segment on the 100-year celebration, and I think you got a lot of positive response from those shows that you did.
Oh, yeah.
And there is a lot of interest here. So I don't know if we can kind of go, we're going to, like I say, get through all these today because it's just not enough time in a day. But I don't know if you wanted to kind of go through a picture and if you want to expand on one where you might have thought it came from, or if there was a story that came with it. So I don't know if you want to start in the 20s.
Right, well,
Okay.
this
Okay.
shows how the timeline was organized.
Okay. Now this was down the hallway in the elementary?
Right,
Okay.
right. And covered the entire wall and went all the way down, up from top to bottom and all the way to the end of the hall. It was great. So all of these labels were at the top of the timeline as it
Okay.
traveled down the wall. And then the committee did an amazing job of getting all of the pictures and information mounted on paper and posted all over the timeline wherever it went. And they, in addition to using historical pictures like this with the children with the early school buses, they had these pictures were organized more or less from the level of the timeline down, the black band that went through the entire timeline, and everything above that was historical context. So they did a whole lot of research on finding what was going on at that time so people could get their minds behind, just how long ago was this, what else was taking place then. So they came up with these fact sheets, which I think are all in the black pieces of paper.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so people could relate, what was going on at the same time as what was taking place in our historical pictures.
Sure.
Okay, so it was a tremendous job. I have pictures of that too, Calvin, that I can pull and share with you to add to this presentation if you want. It shows the committee actually putting the timeline up. So it's quite a
And then
process.
you mentioned earlier in the broadcast that you actually kept it up for about 3 months.
Yes.
So
yeah.
when did it come down?
Right after the Christmas vacation, we took it down.
Okay, and there was still a lot of interest through that period of time?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes, it was. Yeah, people were looking at it the whole time. The whole thing was documented by more than one. Many people photographed it all in sections. So,
Okay.
So that still exists. I believe there's a video that runs down the hall. I don't know if Calvin did that, but I believe there's a video of just going down the hall with it. And then when we took it apart, we actually had a few students here do it, and we told them, we want this taken down as respectfully and in as organized a way as it was put up. So the kids were great. They took everything down individually in order and kept all of the items that the committee came up with organized like that. So every pile has the original items that they used on the timeline.
So now what's the plan moving forward with this?
You want to answer that?
No,
or-
go ahead, go ahead.
Our plan now is to scan all of these in
Okay,
and then have that available as a resource for the school. It can be put on our website, so if people want to go look at the images that were there. I'd like to be able to figure out some way to do it that it's sort of searchable, but I'm not sure how to do that right now. So the first step is scanning all the images.
and then what are you going to do with the hard copies? Are you going to still store them here somewhere?
Haven't talked about that yet because most of these are they're copies. None
Right.
of
there's
these
no-
are
there
originals.
no
Okay,
originals here.
okay.
This is all scanned.
Right, okay.
The originals that are nice and safe and sound in the archive.
Right,
Right.
okay.
Like there's several different pictures of graduating classes over the years that are out of. We have a lot of those in our safe here at the school. Some of the older classes,
Mhm.
Okay.
big print.
Okay, we're back here, and John, this is kind of neat here, if you kind of expand on what this is right here.
Well, this is the notice that was sent out in the Press Republican announcing the opening of the Consolidated Rural School in 1916. And I find it really interesting. One of the last comments in the very last paragraph talks about, that the transportation wagons and auto buses will begin running on October 2nd, which is when the school building actually opened up. And, Chazy was the first rural school district in New York State to have motorized buses.
Which is right here.
Yes.
Keep going.
Oh, okay, I thought you had them both together.
No.
Okay, all right.
So, and that was one of the keys to the successful consolidation of all these one-room schoolhouses was the transportation piece, which is why it hadn't been done before. When you're living 6-7 miles away and you have to get there by horse or walking, it doesn't work. The improvement in transportation allowed the miner's vision to come true.
Now, when this, I just want to go back here for a second, Calvin. He had October 2nd, but I'm assuming back in 1916 that the school start in Labor Day weekend like
I
we were
would
used
guess
to?
not.
Okay.
Because remember, they were working off the agricultural calendar in rural schools, and
Right.
it's harvest time for a lot of things in September, so it may have started later.
And then this looks like it was taken during the winter.
Yep.
So do you know any history of if they had heaters on these buses?
I'm told they had little coal stoves on the buses to keep them warm.
Okay.
But again, that's just a story I've been told. I don't know. I've never actually seen the motorized school bus from back
Okay.
then.
I don't know if you were talking about the first school year. We know that the first school year started mid-November
Okay.
in 1916. They were still working on the building, but they had enough of it completed that they were able to get things going in November. After that, like John said, I believe they followed what we consider a regular school year now, and did September to June.
Okay.
Now, I don't know how much time you have for going off
No,
the
go ahead.
beaten track, but the first school year lasted until about mid-February that year, and then proving that some things never changed, the school year actually came to a halt in February because there was so much absenteeism and sickness. There weren't enough kids coming into the building to make it worthwhile to keep going right at that point. So what they had to figure out, of course, was, well, there were a couple of things. It seems to me that at that point, what you have is suddenly a building full of kids coming together in that number and spreading sickness. We're used to that, even today. If cold, things tend to run through the building because there are a lot of people all together. That might have contributed to the fact that there was a lot of the sickness, that many people being out, and that in addition to the absenteeism or tardiness. What happened after that is Reverend Mott said, the man that came up with the educational plan and the curriculum, said, let's regroup. We've opened the doors. The population has been in for a while. There are clearly some problems here. We're just 3 or 4 months in. So let's close it down. Go over what we've what we've seen so far. And then, as it turned out, I believe they reopened in April and went that year into July to finish that school year. But they did have to do a retreat and regroup in order to figure out, because they were doing all of this, as we know, for the first time. This was a big school in a rural area, and they had stuff they had to learn along the way.
I mean, the school's always kind of goes back to William H. Minor, but we
Right.
always can't forget Reverend Mott.
Yes.
What was his role with the school? I mean, he was, you said the educational background of it, I guess, but what was his role with it? Was he involved in the school the day-to-day when it first opened?
Right.
I think his official title was Dean of Students, if I remember, because he didn't have an educational degree, so he couldn't be titled a principal by New York State regulations. So he was the Dean of Students, I believe, for the first couple years. And then there was some disagreement on how to function between Mr. Mott and Mr. Minor, or Reverend Mott and Mr. Minor,
Mm-hmm.
and they parted ways in the school building.
So that there was a separation from those two.
Yes,
They were together, putting it together.
Yes.
As, I won't say partners, but I guess partners. And they had the dream, the vision, the money to put behind it, but they did have a falling out.
as far as I know, they did.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first I've heard of that, okay. I find that very interesting. And then, of course, these pictures here are just more of, do you know how many buses they actually had, motorized buses?
Well, I'm looking at this picture from 1920, and I can see a horse-drawn bus, 1, 2, 3, 4 smaller vehicles, so maybe those are the wagons they talked about, and then 2 motorized buses.
So
So looks like a total of 7 vehicles to get the students here.
so the buses with the horses were probably more of the kids closer to the school
I would think.
and motorized a little farther out?
Yeah, that would be, well, maybe it's motorized where there were better roads. I don't know.
Yeah, we're all speculating right now. All right, Steve, do you want to pull these out, Calvin?
I didn't look at the top one, but if you look at the roads, that's a good point in the roads. Route 9 wasn't, I don't know if it was paved in that period of time.
Right,
Yeah.
Nothing around here was, I don't think. So, yes, they had all kinds of obstacles, all kinds of things that they had to figure out, to learn about when they got this going.
And then as you look, I'm looking at these pictures, so back in the early days, the kids wore uniforms? Or shirt and ties?
I do remember seeing pictures of high school students wearing ties in the, that 1921 yearbook that we've got lots of copies of that have been shared over the years. I don't know what the school dress code requirement was.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there was a uniform requirement. I have a feeling that would have been maybe too much of a challenge for the folks. I thought I saw one here, some of the,
Looks like knickers and dress shirts, but I don't see ties.
this is a classroom picture from the 20s. I'm sure they, but I think this was taken for the 1921 presentation book, or what we call the yearbook. So that they're dressed up in those pictures, but I think they were all told, we're doing this book on the school, everybody dress your best. But this is a picture of a group, a regular group of kids arriving. So I think
Okay.
I think they were all just in regular school clothes,
Right.
then, and not uniforms. Yeah.
Okay.
That probably would have been a lot to ask of the rural community back then to come up
I'm
with
sure there's a
uniforms.
record. Do you know how big the classes were back then?
I don't know actual numbers. I know graduating classes were single digits for several years, very small numbers.
For a building that big?
Yes.
Wow.
Right. The first year, there's a letter in the archive indicating that there would be no graduates. I think everyone had to catch up with the curriculum at some point, and nobody was at that point. But the following year, 1918, the records here indicate that there were 2 graduates that
In
year,
1918.
In 1918. And our banners here that we use for all of the class days that have all of the
The class colors?
years, dates of the, and dates of graduating classes start with 1918. So that was kind of our first solid clue that there was a graduating class then, so to speak. It amounted to 2 seniors, but in fact 2 did graduate that year,
Mm-hmm.
making it the first year that there were graduating seniors in the school.
Mhm.
That makes this year's group the 100th graduating class.
Okay.
Yeah. And then after that, actually, I think there's a picture in here, pardon my shuffling all the time, but I think there's a picture here of the 1919 class, which was 7 kids, and we're lucky enough to even have their names on that picture. That's the 1918-19 class, I believe. And then we have in the archives, actually, the committee found this, a list from 1918 on, an old type list of all of the graduating classes with their names all included. So that's a nice piece of
From what year on?
1918.
Oh,
It lists those first 2
It does.
kids, Wallace and Viola. I remember their names first names, but I'd have to look that up. But yeah, so we've got the proof of when the first graduates walked, so to speak, walked the stage now it would be. But we're not 100% sure that there was a graduation ceremony for them, because our commencement records are dated or numbered differently than the graduation records. So we think that there might not have been a commencement exercise, they called it, probably maybe until this year or the year after, when the classes were larger. Right now, that's all still, that part of it is guesswork, how we ended up with that mismatch between the graduating classes and the commencement exercises.
Yeah, because my understanding is that all the one-room schoolhouses stopped at 8th grade. So these would have been students that came in, they've done 8 years' worth of schoolwork, and then to meet the requirements for graduation in New York State. So there would have been very small numbers. These may have been kids that were doing some additional work. I don't know how.
Yeah.
But, for everybody, it would have taken 4 years to get to the point where an entire class is graduating.
So when they opened up, was it at that point strictly for high school at that point, or when did elementary come in?
Everything was brought here. So all
Okay.
the one-room schoolhouses that went K-8, basically, and I don't know what they did for high school students, but most of them were K-8. They brought them here, and then those students that were of age to continue on in the high school were brought here. And really, there are two separate schools. As we well know, we have an elementary school, which is K-6, and a 7 through 12 junior senior high school now. And that was the plan when it was first put in place.
If I could speculate on that too, and we see the buildings, there was a larger building here in the hamlet of Chazy, and that might have been high school. I know in Champlain, my father went to a one-room school, which was right next door to where he lived. And then when he got to high school, he went into the village to the Champlain Academy, which is on the corner of Prospect Hill and Elm Street, or was there.
Right.
And so it might have been a similar situation here. You went to the one-room school, and that time period, in the early 1900s, if you went through 8 grades, that probably would have been good enough. And also talking with Jimmy Misek, who was a few years older, I think he was born in 1910, but he would have been, again, beyond this period when he got the graduation time. But he said he had to take a test when he was 14 to show that he was up to it. Otherwise, he would have had to go to school till he was 16. But he wanted to get to work with his father, help his father in the sawmill, and then he became a legend after that.
That's the show you do every Thanksgiving, right?
Right,
Yeah.
yes.
That is a classic.
Yeah.
That guy was incredible. That's another story. That guy was incredible.
Well, the interesting part of this whole experience with creating the celebration and looking at everything is we've answered a lot of questions, and we've created as many more questions. And again, and that's the fun part of this, is we keep exploring more. I just recently was involved in email exchange related to the Lincoln statue that we have sitting in the lobby, when someone who saw our celebration reached out from a school in Massachusetts who also has the same statue.
Is there 11 of them?
He says they're now 15 to 17 that they've been able to identify.
Okay.
And there's different castings. There's a first casting and a second casting, and ours is one from the first casting. But just, he just reached out to me and said, well, and sent me an information of all those places that he's identified that have one of these statues, which is a more exhaustive list than I had before. So that's the fun part of this, and the internet has made this stuff available because anybody can chime in and add to it.
Now, Steve, I see you threw some more pictures here.
Well, just to indicate how quickly the school got to the point where they were graduating what you'd consider a regular-sized class, and things were a little more organized. So by 1920, the last one was 1919. By 25, there were several more kids, obviously graduating, and they were starting to take more formal pictures of them, So things were getting organized and underway by then, and then I guess they were in a regular routine of what we're used to now, of, a regular graduating class, record their names, take their pictures, things, just got organized more quickly. This is the first, well, not the first, but it was the graduating class of 1920. So again, even 2 years after that, the first 2 kids I talked about, we started to get, we went from that small
7.
group we looked at to this one, and then kept going up, and it became, you know. And then
From that point
things were
on,
underway,
it just
yeah.
it just
Normal
grew.
number of kids and, right.
Oh,
Till
and
we
then-
get to, no, go ahead.
Numbers would have also been impacted at the very start with World War I going on, and males signing up to go over and fight, and that impacted the school again in the 40s with World War II,
Right.
as it did every school in the country.
Right. Yeah, there was, that was what was neat about this timeline is, and that they did put the historical information on it along with this, because then you saw the, like the influenza epidemic that was going on in at the same time the school was starting up. And then heading toward the end of the 20s, the stock market crash. You know, things were affecting the world all around them, and they were just trying to keep up with it.
What I'm amazed as you're going through this is that people were able to give us these pictures this far back. That there was records of this.
Right, right. And a
This
lot
far
of
back.
this is in the archive. This is so this is the class of '28. So by the end of by 10 years after the school got going, you know, you had a nice group of kids graduating. They were doing the formal picture. So
Mhm.
yeah, things were underway at that point.
So through this whole process, as these pictures were coming in, and were there any pleasant surprises that just came to you through this whole process? You just something you weren't planning on or counting on, and you go, well, that's kind of neat. I mean, that was. I know it's kind of putting you on the spot with a question like that, but something this big,
Right.
I would think as you're going through this that there were moments or like aha moments, like
Right.
wow.
Some of it had to do with the artifacts that came in. Not just, it was great that people were able to continue adding photographs to the collection, especially, you know, to have, if you know, if you ever hear somebody yell, you know, hallelujah, all the way from here to Plattsburgh, it's because we found a picture of the two kids that graduated in 1918. We have the kids from 19, you know, so that's like a miracle to me to see that, you know,
Mhm.
that's, you know, we have that. So it's that type of thing that I was unaware of a collection of color photographs of the school when the transition was taking place and the new school was being built. And Ellen Adams over at the Alice had this great collection of snapshots, color snapshots that somebody had taken at that time, some of which will be in the yearbook this year.
Mhm.
That just show that transition of the two schools together, you know, for a relatively brief period of time in the history of this whole thing. To see the one go up and this one, the original one, standing there in the background, you know, as it was slowly, you know, it was
Yeah.
about to disappear, you know. But it's just that type of thing surprised me. I think I had just gone over it one day and asked her. I told her I'd only ever seen one or two color pictures of the old building ever since I had been here. That added to it by 15, and then I posted it on the Celebration Facebook page. Does anyone else have color pictures? And you know, these one after the other, they kept popping up on Facebook. It was kind of thrilling for me because the old black and white pictures are great, but we live in a color world, and seeing all of this happening in color just made it so real, you know. I mean, it's the only opportunity a lot of us will ever get to see what that looked like for a moment in time, you know, as it looked when the sun's shining on it in color, and you know, it's so that type of thing was just a revelation, and they just kept coming out of nowhere, you know. People were, you know, well, I have this one, I have that one. Someone had, you know, amazing pictures of the demolition that I had never seen before. We've only found so far, and so I'm going to put this out there, one picture so far that shows the old building from inside the new building. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah.
because I always thought, what did it feel like to be in here, since I wasn't here at the time, to be walking through the lobby here in the classrooms, and that building was
It's right
out
there.
there.
It was
You know,
there.
what did it look like in here? So far, we only have one picture from when it was new here, the new Shakespeare room. Someone just took a snapshot of the new seniors, I think, getting their desks ready, and the old school is outside the window. So if anyone has anything else like that, that's something that we're desperately looking for, pictures of the old and the new together in that way. The other thing I've seen only one picture of since we did all of this is a color picture from inside the old school. Just one. There must be more, but, or maybe not. I mean, you know, when it came down, you know, color photography, well, it had been around for a while, but I don't know if anyone was thinking then of just taking pictures inside the building. So those are two things we're really, you know, eager to find.
So, you bring up a good point. The new school was up, the old school is still up.
Right.
What was the distance from the old school to the new school? There wasn't a lot of room there, was there?
I would say it's about 20 or 25 feet,
At the
if
most.
that.
And they had to
At the
tear the
most.
old school down, the new school up.
Yes.
Right.
And you're talking about a 5-story high building.
Right.
That was taken down with
Right.
a wrecking ball.
Right. They actually had to, the library, the outside library entrance here was so close to the old building that they had to tear the front, it's a little hard to see here. They had to tear the front entrance off of the old school in order to build this school next to it. That's how close it was.
Oh, wow.
They had to take the portico off to fit it there. But there are a couple of great pictures that Ellen Adams got us from the Alice that show the two buildings from the outside and with just a little squeeze through,
So it
a
wasn't
little
that
alleyway
close.
between. Yes, and so next time we get together, I'll make sure and have that,
Yeah.
because that picture is so. It was so moving to me to see that. You just see these two buildings representing the same thing, you know, great education in this community and what Minor wanted here. But to see the two of them from the side sort of facing each other, you know, like this one, you know, the old one's,
Right.
you know, towering over the other one because, you know, different kind of design, but, you know, it's like just facing the old and the new.
Yeah.
To me, it was just a really, you know, memorable picture.
Well, as you
And
tell
they're-
this story, I'm thinking it's even more remarkable. I don't say if it's more, but it is remarkable to be able to tear the old school down and not damage the new school.
Right.
When
right,
it's that close.
Right, right. And
That's-
I asked somebody that, I know we have to get going right now. If, I can't remember who I asked, somebody though that was around at the time, I asked him the day of the centennial, and if they recalled any damage, and he said, you know, I only remember maybe a small piece of rebar or something bumping into a door jamb or a window outside somewhere on the
Courtyard.
east side,
Yeah.
yeah, which was quickly fixed. But otherwise, it was an amazing engineering feat, just the way they had to take that. And we have aerial views of that too, of the old school in the middle of the horseshoe of the new one, you know, coming down. But they had to really come down this way. They couldn't.
Right.
They couldn't
Yeah,
go out. It was
exactly.
really amazing.
I think they could drop things toward the current parking lot, because that
Right,
side
they
was
went
empty.
that way as much
Right.
as
So
they could.
it
And they
was a
saved
challenge.
They saved to the front for the end. The last thing that came down was the front because that was the hardest part.
Sure.
And then I think and it took them a lot longer than anyone ever anticipated, right?
I think the story is that the person who was in charge of tearing it down almost went broke in the process of
Right.
tearing it down, because it was a very well-built structure.
Right. Right. Well, you heard, I don't know if they heard the bell, Calvin, but did you want to add something?
Well, yeah, I've got to point out to the viewers who aren't from Chazy that we jumped from the 1920s to the 1960s here, so don't be confused if
Oh,
you're
yes,
watching this.
yes,
We're talking
sorry,
about
yes.
constructing the
Right.
1916 school, then we jumped to
Right, okay.
constructing the 1968 school, so.
Not hard to do when you're
Yeah,
doing something
right.
like this. But this is just one segment. We got through the 20s, so we've got a few more decades left. But you know, you guys are obviously busy, and so we'll come back and do some more shows with this. But it's just basically the post celebration and what people did and the pictures they brought, and just adding to the history of this remarkable school.
And they're
So-
still looking for more.
And they're still, and as you heard, they're still looking for more, so get hold of Steve here at the school or John, and they'll be more than happy to take whatever you can give them, because we're just building this archive up. And so Hometown Stories, Calvin on the camera, I'm Joey Trombley, John Fairchild, and Steve Patnode, librarian, superintendent of Chazy Central Rural School. I do help Calvin. I am currently the school board president. I guess I'll throw that in there also. So we all have a hand in this to some aspect, I guess. But we hope you enjoyed this show, and we'll definitely be back with more.